Hi, this week's Sunday night movie was The Mouse on the Moon, the 1963 sequel to The Mouse That Roared. The first film was the story of the tiny duchy of Grand Fenwick, an English speaking micronation somewhere on the border between Liechtenstein and San Marino, and starred Peter Sellers in three roles as both the Grand Duchess Gloriana, the Prime Minister Lord Mountjoy, and the plucky ordinary citizen Tully Bascom. Because the country is almost bankrupt after its one export, Grand Fenwick wine is undercut by another vineyard. They decide that they will capitalize on the Marshall Plan and attempt to invade America with their antiquated armor and pike staffs. Unfortunately, they land in New York the day that the entire city is mounting a civil defense drill, so they not only manage to easily conquer the city, they take prisoner an American scientist who's been developing the Q bomb, which potentially could go off and require them to redo the globe. And so the tiny nation becomes a focus of world affairs. In this second film, firstly, no Peter Sellers. Secondly, the duchy gets involved in the space race. And its plans to apply to the US for financing to develop rocketry, but actually Mountjoy's scheme is to use it to to properly install indoor plumbing in his house. But the Russians, not wanting to be left behind and take advantage of whatever it is that the Grand Fenwickians are doing, sends them a rocket. Well, it's discovered that the wine, if heated correctly, can provide a kind of explosive power and be used as fuel. So Grand Fenwick hatches a plan to land the first man on the moon. As I say, Peter Sellers isn't involved in this film. Gloriana is now played by Margaret Rutherford, Mountjoy by Ron Moody, and Tully isn't in it at all, but instead we have Mountjoy's son Vincent, played by Bernard Cribbins. The film is a tight hour and 20 minutes, and for what it's worth, it's not that bad. I was expecting something a bit ropier, but it's an early Richard Lester film. His next picture would be A Hard Day's Night. So we have comedy talent, we have acting talent, and we have a solid premise. And the result is something that's actually pretty fine. The main problem is the hoops the script has to jump through to make the central concept plausible. By the end of the film, Vincent, and the scientist who developed the Q bomb, who's the one character played by the same actor from the first film, David Kossoff, have travelled to the moon very gradually using a rocket that's powered by wine, with maneuvering jets made out of shower heads, and has taken 3 weeks to get to the moon because it moves very, very gradually. And they took all their food on the way, and it's like the inside of a Jules Verne submarine. There are chickens everywhere, and attempts to explain how this would work are weirdly misguided because it's powered by wine. You don't have to explain, oh, yes, it works slowly because it's powered by wine, because that's how the wine works. They don't have to keep trying to explain things and then making jokes out of how convoluted these explanations are. No, it's powered by wine. Just stick to what's simple. But as I say, it's generally pretty entertaining. There are lots of recognizable faces in supporting roles. Peter Sallis and John LeMessurier. Ed Bishop, who would later be involved with Jerry Anderson, appears as an American astronaut. It winds up with Grand Fenwick managing to get to the moon first, even though the Russians and Americans also launch rockets, but don't quite make it in time. However, it turns out the moon has a very soft surface, and when the Americans try and take off with their very powerful rockets, as do the Russians, their capsules sink. So they have to beg the Grand Fenwickians for a lift back to Earth. It's entertaining enough. It's very lightweight. Margaret Rutherford is very entertaining as Gloriana, who is spaced out most of the time, giving the wrong speeches, just very cheerful and happy to be around and outdoors. Calls Mountjoy Bobo, which is my favourite gag from the first film that they carried over. And it's a fine cast. It's an amusing premise. It's nicely executed. What more could you reasonably ask for?